afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. The date is Thursday. Today is November 3rd. And I'm looking at my laptop at an article that I wrote somewhere in late July and submitted to the Pacific Asia Travel Association, or PATA, and it's titled Climate Adaptation and Tourism, a closer link than we might think. So for some time I've been feeling that there is actually a stronger link than we could be thinking between tourism and climate adaptation. Climate adaptation is the ability and or the capacity of destinations and places to adapt to the effects of climatic changes. So could there be a stronger link than some of us might actually be thinking? How can climate adaptation strategies be supported by tourism activities? How can we as the travel and tourism industry, what can we do to support strategies and actions in places to enable greater capability or ability of places to adapt to the changing climate? Well, first of all, we must identify and understand that climate change impacts are increasingly found in more and more destinations, in more and more places, and unfortunately including places that we love. Climate change, which includes global warming and things like rising sea levels, are having an impact, for example, on UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And having said that, that will also have an impact on the living culture and heritage of communities who happen to live around or near those places. So there could be a possibility that the pandemic, the recent COVID-19 pandemic, there could be a possibility that this pandemic might have or might be actually making climate adaptation in tourism destinations a possible idea. There could be a possibility that this recent pandemic could be raising the urgency in places of making climate adaptation something that is more and more important, something that we must pay more attention to. So the next thing I want to say is adapting to climate change impacts in an industry like the tourism industry, which is considered to be a very vulnerable industry, vulnerable to threats, vulnerable to disaster, to all sorts of crises. And the tourism industry, as shown in the last maybe 10, 15, 20 years, is also an industry that is increasingly shown itself to be very highly climate sensitive. So adaptation in the tourism industry would be both challenging and very complicated. But if we look at it from the other side of the same coin, this is an industry that could be very ideal to support strategies relating to climate adaptation. It is ideal in the sense that this is an industry with various sectors, with many sectors, and when we say that, it means that there are also much opportunities for us to engage and involve. Tourism's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions is estimated to be around 8 or 9% globally. And in the article, I also wrote that we urgently need, amongst a host of things, we urgently need these few things. First, we need more tourism policies in tourism that promote adaptation, both directly and indirectly. Second thing I feel we should also need is smaller tourism destinations to also come forward and be able to understand the potential roles that they can play, even though they could be smaller in size. The potential roles that they can play when it comes to supporting adaptation strategies. One more thing that we need, in the article that I wrote, tourist attractions have to think about increasing resilience to facilitate adaptation. Increasing resilience is something that people in climate change have been talking about for the longest time. Because when we increase resilience in a big way, we reduce vulnerabilities. And the fourth thing that I wrote that we urgently need, amongst a host of things, the fourth thing that we need is more tourist activities that can promote the idea of adaptation. I believe, and many of us will also tend to agree, that this is the era we are living in, where travelers have different perceptions and ideas of how traveling should be, and tourist activities have evolved. We are living now in a period of time where there is a different angle from the way we used to look at how we travel and the things that we can do or could be doing when we travel. So the fourth thing that I wrote in the article that I feel we urgently need is more tourist activities. We should have more activities in tourism destinations that can promote this adaptation idea. And so it is pertinent that more and more tourist attractions think about ways to reduce vulnerability by doing things and having things that increase resilience, so that climate adaptation has a higher chance of succeeding. And we realize that adaptation in climate change is something that could be a very complicated idea for many places, including or perhaps especially tourism destinations. But it might also mean interesting opportunities arising. Perhaps, for example, opportunities to engage the informal sector and those who otherwise may rarely gain from the positive impacts or the benefits from tourism's growth. And so we need tourism destinations to think about the following few things. And that I'm coming almost to the end of my podcast. We need tourism destinations to formulate policies, tourism policies that reflect adaptation practices and increase resilience to climate change. Second thing that we need tourism destinations to come up with is to come up with innovative tourism activities that support adaptation. And we also need tourism destinations, lastly, to think about how tourists can play a part in helping destinations increase resilience. And one example of what that means is helping thinking how tourists can play a part in safeguarding intangible cultural heritage for communities who live in or near heritage sites. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to end off with saying that adaptation must be localized. Climate change is a global phenomenon, but when it comes to adaptation, we have to think local. And one of the reasons is because tourism destinations are all very unique, not just in terms of sizes, but in terms of nature and the purpose, and in terms of this makeup and many other factors. So I thank you for giving me 10 minutes of your time. I wish you a good weekend Friday. Tomorrow is Friday, and that means weekend is coming once again, and I have a fantastic weekend, and I just love to talk about tourism, and thank you for tuning into my podcast. This is Kevin signing off from a small little island called Singapore, all the way in Southeast Asia. Thank you. Have a lovely day.